Hello, if you are just joining us, we are about to do some skull studies and talk about the anatomy of the skull during our anatomical drawing unit in drawing class. What we have in front of us is a piece of tracing paper, our printed out diagram. We also have, pretending this is a new page in my sketchbook or wherever I left off with my notes is fine. And at my table, I'm sharing a box of colored pencils. The last thing that you guys need is that roll of tape, and we will need this in just a minute. So I'm actually going to just have that on hand, and we are going to push this to the side before we get started. Now, what I want us to do first is start identifying different parts of the skull. Now, the more knowledge you have about parts of the skull, the more aware of what you are drawing underneath the face and underneath the head, or within the head, it'll be more precise and accurate. So now at this time, I want you to open up your colored pencils, and I'm going to color in each section of the skull and explain that very briefly. Now, it doesn't matter what colors you use. It doesn't have to match the same exact color I am using, as long as you have variety to show each section is different. Now, the skull, as you know, when it's forward, it has symmetry somewhat, pretty close, not exact, going down the middle. And you'll see that on each side we have orbits, we have two parts of the nasal cavity, and then we have those shapes mirroring. From the side view, you're going to notice that the skull has two parts that are two big chunks of pieces, okay? So we have the cranium right here, which is this whole top, and then we have protruding out that mandible. To start, we're going to talk about the frontal bone. The frontal bone, and I'm taking my first color, the frontal bone starts at the top of the cranium, and it goes down to the brow bone, and it stops about halfway here, like halfway down the orbit. We'll talk about in a moment. But this frontal bone, some people make really, really small, so you want to think about that being almost halfway from the top of the cranium to the middle of where the eyes sit. Almost that far, okay? That also is over here. I'm going to do the same color just to show the frontal bone. Now, when you're looking at the outsides of the skull, we have a few different sections. Now, when you are a baby, those sections aren't necessarily fused together for a little while. That's why you want to really be careful with babies' heads. They're really squishy because all these bones are not fused. So, but it does help us during birth when we don't have all of those fused together. Anyways, looking at this section here, this is called the parietal bone. This is on the sides, and it's kind of a big section of our skull. And you want to be aware of the scale of this whenever you're drawing the side view of the head. The side view of the head does not stop right here. You have this whole part back here, including most of that parietal bone, and it goes all the way back to our occipital bone. Our occipital bone is protecting our occipital lobe, which is where our vision part of our brain is. That's why it's called that. And working our way towards the, kind of towards the front, we're going to work our way to the temporal bone. So on the sides, beneath the parietal bone, we have that temporal bone. Find a good color here. And that's just the very outside here and right here. The tiny bone that's right here is called the sphenoid bone. Take another color. And that's just a little guy that's it's kind of more inside of our, it's like more inward, I guess. And now we're ready to break down the bones of the face. Now, the bones of the face are really important for you to know because of the variation. Some people might have more defined zygomatic bones, which are also known as your cheekbones. Some people might have more narrow or angled. So when you know what that is underneath, that is again called the zygomatic bone. Actually, I'm going to just do some highlighters. And that goes from the outside of what are called our orbits, which are these holes that our eyeballs sit in. Now, in between our orbits, we have our nasal bone, which isn't labeled in this diagram, but we can do just a little color right here for the nasal bone. And below the nasal bone is the nasal cavity. Your nose is made of mostly cartilage, so that is, you can see from the side view, it's almost like an opening or two-part cavity so that you can have those canals going up to your sinuses. Now, from the inner tier of our orbit down to the top of our teeth, you have what's called the maxillary bone. This is a majority of the face, and it's shaped like this. Oh, and I forgot to color the zygomatic for a moment. On the side view, there we go, there we go. That zygomatic bone does go back a little ways. Now the final bone of the skull you want to be aware of is that mandible. People have different angles, different shapes of mandibles. Some people have more square, some people might have more rounded, some people might have narrow and pointier mandibles. That is something to be aware of when you're looking at characteristics. So I'm going to color in, and that is hooked in this joint here, giving us the ability to open and close. But the mandible is what that is called. All right. Voila. Those are the parts of the skull. Now you guys have skulls on your tables. As you are looking at that, I want you to be aware of where each part is and what those shapes are and where they are in relation to each other. Now, going to our sketchbook, we are going to take a piece of tape, just a little tiny piece, doesn't matter, and the goal is for us to just take it, I'm going to tear it into two pieces and put a piece on top and a piece on the bottom. The purpose is just to make it stay within our sketchbook, okay? We're going to also grab our tracing paper. And with your tracing paper, I want you to only put one piece of tape, line it up, and put one piece of tape just at the top so that we can lift and look, lift and look. We're going to use tracing paper to practice the shape and proportions of things a few times throughout this unit. And this is just going to be a quick exercise where you take a pencil and you don't have to label it. We're just going to practice drawing the shapes. So what you can do with your pencil is just outline the basic shape of the skull. And I'm doing the top of that skull first on the left side. And I can think about that frontal bone, what that shape looks like. I can think about those other bones on the sides, working my way from the front view going to the zygomatic bone, how that protrudes out and in, out and in. Taking a break, I'm going to identify the shapes of the orbits. Notice how they're not perfect circles. kind of tilted as well. Working down the nasal bone to the nasal cavity, I'm just going to trace a very basic shape there. And it's kind of like an upside down heart shape for the nasal cavity. Maybe I'll shade in that orbit too. Working our way from the bottom of the orbit, doing this little line here to separate the zygomatic bone and the maxillary bone. Noticing where this bone goes inwards to line up with the top of our teeth. I'm going to go now to the mandible, starting with the very outside line, and then doing the inner part there. Once I get to the teeth, I'm just going to do a line straight across here, a line for the bottom. I already drew a line for the top, and we're just going to simplify, and we have a skull drawing there. Now for the next minute, I want you guys to do the same thing but with the side view. Doesn't matter what order of things you do this. It's more just understanding the shape, becoming more aware, familiar. And then you have a quick sketch of a side view. Now what's going to happen once you're done with that is you're going to tear it off, and we're just going to place it right underneath on that page in your sketchbook, so you can have that shown for reference as well. Now tomorrow, you're going to use what you learned today, and you are going to be doing little sketches from observation of the skull that's on your tables, or I'll let you also do some studies maybe that you find from images on your Chromebook. And what you're going to do is I do a number of sketches of skulls on a new page in your sketchbook. So you can start out with just that cranium, and then you want to think about the angle of the mandible, and then you can think about also, and this is just a quick little study, based off of that sketch that I did there with the diagram, I'm using my knowledge that I just copied to think about those parts. So you can do different positioning. Maybe you have it slightly angled. And again, you're going to spend more time doing this tomorrow, but then you're going to think about those different parts and proportions based off of those exercises. And then you want to also, I'm going to open it up. You can do ink if you want. You can do, that's totally fine if you want to jazz it up. So let's go. I'm going to just show you real briefly. I know we have only 5 minutes left of class. I want to make sure you have enough time to put your supplies away. But for the hour tomorrow, here we go. Skull studies. You can have some fun with it. Maybe use some charcoal, make it kind of moody. You can use pencil or ink and watercolor. I might, for fun, have a few other animal skulls. I have a few small-scale animal skulls that you guys can play around with. Now, is that accurate or, might not be the most beneficial when we're doing human anatomy, but it might be kind of fun for you to do a few animal skulls and some human skulls on the same page. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. I'm going to stop my recording. Thank you those for watching.